a new stretch of the 4 sermons that I'm particularly excited. I hear myself twice. I like hearing myself, but not to that point. Akanda, you're awesome. Thank you so much. When he's back, I want to thank him. Do you hear me twice? I hear myself twice, so I'm not crazy yet, so that's good. So all the prayers, maybe I got the extra. Maybe I should speak without it. Oh, maybe it's because of this mic. Yeah? You got it? Awesome. We good? All right. So some of you know that I went to a non-Seventh-day Adventist seminary here in Southern California. And I was thrilled. I had to take a class on worship and the history of worship and the tradition of worship. And I was thrilled to find out that about once a year for 4 weeks, the entire Christian world, traditional Christian church, high churches, they become Adventists. Because according to the liturgical calendar that a lot of churches follow, 4 weeks between Thanksgiving, roughly between Thanksgiving and Christmas, called Advent season. This is the time that Christians talk about Jesus coming. Jesus' first coming as we prepare for Christmas, but also Jesus' second coming. And I realized that how much blessed we are as Seventh-day Adventists, that we don't have to wait until the end of the year to talk about this, that we can talk about the entire year, all our identity about expecting Jesus coming. But at the same time, it's not a bad idea to be reminded as we have the conversation, as we observe the world around us, as people talk about the Christmas, to be reminded what's the meaning of this term that seems to be so familiar to us. What does it mean to expect Christ's coming? And in the text that you heard today, we get this idea that something about the Christ coming and the way Jesus talked about it in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke, he talks about the second coming, but the event that is, we can have a mixed feelings about it. I don't know about you, but my fatigued mind velcros to itself this phrase that stays out of the text that was read to us in a beautiful Australian accent. I think all scripture is written in Australian. That's how it's meant to be. People looking for King James Version, New King James. I think I want an Australian sounding version. Such a translation because it sounds much deeper. So when I hear this, stay alert, it sticks to my mind, and I try to understand why. Okay, until November came. Can you guess what happens in November in Russia? It's miserable and it's snow. And I was just one of the lucky ones whose job was, and I don't remember if I told you that, as some of you have shared, my job was to clean the front entrance to the seminary, where the seminary president, who is now actually vice president of the General Conference, Arthur Shteley, he liked to come to his office, but he had this habit of being in the office at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he did not like to go through the snow. So 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I will look in the window, and while everybody says, it's snowing, I have to admit, I had to, in my mind, a few words crossed my mind that a pastor is not supposed to say. Because I could not get out of my house because it was snowed up. I had to jump out of the window, grab a shovel, and for 2 hours shovel the snow so the front entrance is clean. And the best part of it is it was all for free, because in the seminary you're supposed to work 8 hours a week. It was part of the seminary training, so you're supposed to know how to work physically. So we all had different assignments. Guess what happens after you it me again? Guess what happens after you have a good breakfast because you're hungry? You've been working in the freezing cold in the morning, and then at 8 o'clock, you get into nice and warm classroom. Stay alert, Dementyev. I open my eyes, and it's funny, I don't know if that happened to you, but my hand, I would fall asleep in the class. I was sitting in the second row, right in front of the teacher, right in front of the professor, and he would yell at me, but my hand would keep writing stuff. So I open my eyes, and there's just the scribbles on the paper, and stay alert, and I'm trying to figure out where it was and what was happening. These words of Jesus, stay alert, sound almost harsh, almost cruel to us. Why is Jesus requiring us who are tired to stay alert? Didn't he say, come to me, all you weary, and I'll give you comfort and peace? I always want to go and come, I don't blame you. Some people come and take a nice nap during the sermon. That's okay. That's fine, because that's what Jesus said. Come and you rest. That's fine. This is what time and space to do this. But Jesus somehow says, stay alert. Just like in that classroom, when my hand keeps scribbling, my mind was somewhere else, bouncing dreams like a pinball machine. I wonder if there is more to it than staying alert. You're just simply feeling ashamed and guilty for falling asleep or taking a snooze during a sermon. One of the funniest experiences about staying alert, I don't know if you ever met a pastor who fell asleep during his own sermon. Have you? Oh, I have to tell you that. It's not in my thing. We just came from Ukraine. And the jet lag is 10 hours difference, and the jet lag is the worst. And I don't do well with jet lags. So I was preaching at Riverside Community Church, and I just kind of put my hand on the pulpit, and I was talking about, I don't remember what it was. I thought it would be a good idea just to rest my head a little bit. And the next thing I know, I woke up, my mind just turned off. You know the sermon is not going well if the pastor falls asleep during his own sermon. Stay alert, Jesus says. And this is not only the phrases that you hear in the classrooms when they fall asleep. This is the sermons that I've heard a few times. And you hear from the preachers, are you ready? Stay alert. And all this stay alertness conversation in our communities is tied to this idea of Jesus coming. And somehow the same feeling that I had from my professor who called me out in front of everybody, this guilt and shame, and always this nagging question. I don't know if that's been your question or you've been wrestling or it's just me. You ask yourself, am I alert? And how do I measure that alertness? Is it my both eyes are open, my one eye is open? Am I standing up and down? What do I need to do to show that I am alert? What does it involve? Maybe Jesus means something more than this. Maybe stay alert goes much a deeper level than just above taking a snooze during a sermon. Stay alert. In those words, Jesus is saying, uncovers, I believe, more than meets the eye. So what was Jesus talking about? He's talking about the events that are coming in the future. Jesus is talking about tomorrow, if you will. How did the conversation start? The beginning of chapter 21 of Luke, Jesus overhears the conversation about tomorrow. In the Jewish tradition, tomorrow was assured always by one and only one factor, is the presence of God. And as you all know, God would dwell where? In a temple. God is in a temple. As long as we have the temple, our tomorrow is guaranteed. As long as we follow the traditions, the ritual, as long as we have the right doctrines, as long as our religious life squares away, we're safe. And this is the conversation in the beginning of Luke 21 that Jesus overhears, that people are talking about the beauty of the temple. And I can just picture the crowd of people just standing, just observing how marvelous the temple was. Temple was truly the work of art, just an example of human ingenuity and creativity. These gorgeous lines, these colors, the golden leaves, and very detailed decorations, and of course the famous golden roof. The whole idea to build the roof out of gold was meant with a very specific purpose, because as you know, every Jew is supposed to travel to Jerusalem three times a year, and the way that Jerusalem stood as a city on a hill, and then the temple was on a hill. So from far away, when these tired pilgrims would be making, and you need this a little bit extra energy to make it to this final stretch, and the sun would hit that golden roof, and it just explodes with color, and people will see that's the destination. I'm almost there. I'm almost at the temple, and they would make their way up the hill to the temple. How beautiful the temple was. Our future is guaranteed by the temple. But Jesus stops the conversation. It brings the gloom. Kind of ruins the party. Jesus goes apocalyptic on us. The word apocalyptic comes from apocalypse, and apocalypse comes from Greek word that literally means lifting up the curtain, unveiling something. The book of Revelation is actually in the Greek called apocalypse. We have a very negative understanding of everything apocalyptic, because we always think it's the end, this is the war, has a very dark kind of colors of things. But the whole idea is that apocalyptic means opening the curtain into the future and taking the peek, what is about to happen. Jesus says, do you want to take a peek? Come take a look. You see a lot of things in there, but one thing you don't see is the temple. Imagine the world without the temple. In that time is to lose everything, lose the identity. Jesus opens the covers. And the crowd looks at him and say, please take it back. Please close the curtain. We don't want to see into the future, because we can't imagine tomorrow without the temple. Worrying about tomorrow is very much in the human nature. We always talk about tomorrow. I don't know any mentally healthy person who's not concerned about tomorrow. And when Jesus overhears this crowd, when he hears the conversation, he realizes that their tomorrow, their hopes for tomorrow are hinged on the idea of the correct and proper religious rituals in this place where they thought the future should be founded on. The temple of the life, the temple was the center of their lives, not only in a religious sense. The temple was the place where you bring all your taxes. The temple where you come to bless your children, where you bless your relationships. The temple was everything. The life without the temple was impossible. And Jews had a long history of hinging their hopes for tomorrow on the temple. We remember how when Moses was gone, and people's pastor, Aaron, tried to deal with the people, and they asked him, they begged him. What did they beg him to do? They begged him to build a golden calf. They wanted to create something that would remind them of the temples in Egypt. There was nothing wrong with the golden calf, according to Aaron's mind, because they thought as long as you have the right idea what it means, and in his mind it was just representing the God that Israelites were worshiping. So to creating the object in a space for worship to substitute the relationship with the living God was a bad idea. This is not where you hinge your hopes for tomorrow. The history in Israel continues, and if we read Jeremiah chapter 7 and 21, 28, this theme in Jeremiah repeats again and again, because the priest in Jerusalem, they walk around, and the prophet goes up and says, what are you doing? You departed from the ways of God. You're not living the life that God is asking you to live, because the life, according to Jeremiah, according to Isaiah, according to Amos, according to all the prophets, the life with God would not only include the self-care, not only self-pampering, not only raising your personal ego, but worrying for those who are not like you, for the other. How you take care of the orphan, the widow, and the alien was the measure of spirituality. God says you're not doing all of this, so it doesn't matter what kind of rituals you live. But those priests are walking around and say, nothing is going to happen to us. Don't give us this, that something is going to happen, because we have the temple. We build the temple. Do you see that marvelous temple? Do you see these beautiful lines? Do you see those golden leaves? Do you see that golden roof? Solomon built that, and God ordered his father David and promised his father David that he's going to be with us forever, no matter what we do, as long as we have the temple. But that didn't work for that generation. In 586, 87 BC, the temple gets leveled and burned down. And now the people escaping again, they take into Babylon. You know how that story goes. For a couple hundred years, almost a couple hundred years, nothing is happening. And then the temple is being rebuilt again, and then rebuilt again by Herod. Herod spent years and decades of building the temple, and now it's the most beautiful thing. But again, the purpose of that was to create the foundation. But we started getting a feeling that every time we tried to build those temples, every time we either create a golden calf or build this beautiful structure with the golden roof, we are making something that fits and responds to the way that we think as human beings. This is all human-made things that we start hanging our hopes for tomorrow on. Again and again, this themes comes. What happens when you lose the temple? In the book of Daniel, we start realizing, and Daniel is one of the texts in the ancient Israel that starts giving an idea that the future does not necessarily depend on the structures and the rituals. Future depends on something else, something that stays beyond. Daniel goes apocalyptic. Daniel opens and lifts up that curtain into the future. That's why the books of Daniel are connected with the book of Revelation, and that's why we spend so much time understanding, because it gives us an idea that there is something beyond that just hanging our hopes on the human-made things. There's something more. Jesus says, as for the things you're admiring, the time is coming when not even the one stone will be left upon another. All will be demolished. Luke chapter 21, verse 6. Everything that you put your hopes on, everything, the human creativity, ingenuity, technological advances, not a stone will be left. How is it possible? How can it be that so much been put in? How can we? There's so much we know, there's so much we achieved. We should feel so good about ourselves. I think one of the greatest lessons, and it certainly does not sound this way, but maybe down the road we realize the good that God can use very unfortunate circumstances to do something for the expansion of God's kingdom. It's been about 2 years since we first heard about COVID-19. I don't know why we still call it COVID-19, because it's been 19, 20, 21. You know what I'm saying? Did you hear the latest? Just yesterday came out. Omicron, the new strain that was found in South Africa. Now we banned traveling from 8 nations. Omicron. It just happened to be, it brings back my seminary memories. Because Omicron is the 15th letter in the Greek alphabet. Omicron, and I wonder if that's the irony of calling that virus, this is the 15th strain or what it is, but maybe there's another reason, because Omicron is just happened to be a mathematical term that stands for asymptotic. Is there any mathematicians here? asymptotic functions. Asymptotic function is something, it's labeled with this letter Omicron that looks like O. It's something that describes mathematic formula that the curve on the axis, the curve gets so close but never ends. And I wonder, the irony of that name is that we will never be able to overcome. Through eternity, through infinity, we're never going to be able to overcome the curse of this virus. I hope it's not the case, but the name is really scary. Omicron now. I don't want to speculate about COVID and vaccines and how it all came down, but one thing for sure, that COVID demonstrated that no matter how advanced we are, no matter how much we achieve, no matter how much we believe in ourselves, it all seems to be completely useless, and we just as vulnerable as ever when there's something like this comes. In all our security and everything we hand on our trust and our faith for tomorrow into our own achievement, our own knowledge, collapsed like a Jerusalem temple in the 70 AD. It seems like we can control over tomorrow quite, especially as demonstrated in the last couple of years. What are the other options about facing tomorrow left? We can't control it. What are the other options left? We either ignore it, and we live as if there's no tomorrow, and when there's no tomorrow, what can we do? Let's go all to Las Vegas and party. Live like there's no tomorrow. Or another option, you constantly live in the fear of tomorrow. You constantly feel that tomorrow is, and that kind of enslaves you, because you always you know what else is going to happen, and you wake up and the first time. I don't know about you. The first thing that I see my phone with the messages and alerts and things, and I'm like, what else is in there? We either ignore tomorrow if we cannot control it, or we try, or we live into control of tomorrow when the tomorrow controls us. Jesus warned us about these three basic attitudes: trying to control tomorrow, trying to ignore tomorrow, or to let tomorrow control us. But when we look at all these options, we feel like I'm talking to the kind of adolescents when Jesus says, do not party, do not get drunk, so don't try to waste your present because you're not sure about tomorrow, but also not to worry, not to be anxious. Don't go into something that I would tell probably my children, don't go party, don't be anxious about tomorrow. But the question is, if we cannot control tomorrow, if we should not ignore tomorrow, and we should not let tomorrow control us, what options do we have left? I will see you tomorrow, I told her. And I already reached and opened the door. She buzzed me out, because to enter that room, you have to check in and check out, and she had a button. I don't remember her name. Let's call her Susie. Susie was an LVN working at the infusion center at San Bernardine's Medical Center. Those of us who don't know what infusion center is, infusion center is where people would come for their chemotherapy treatment. I spent a few weeks with the church member. I was there almost every day, just sitting, maybe 3 dozen people, big room, probably size of this space here, and a chair and an IV pole, and there's a bag with the stuff, and it's a poison. Just drip, drip. So when I said, I'll see you tomorrow, she said, nah, kind of not looking forward to tomorrow. I don't know about you, Pastor. You know that song, Tomorrow, Tomorrow, I Love You Tomorrow, from Annie? Not a big fan. I knew it was not time for me to leave, so I closed the door, turned around, and said, Susie, tell me more. She said, it's just hard. I had to work really hard to stop worrying about the people who come here. And I had to make and work on myself. I got to go see a therapist. So I would not compare the list from yesterday with today and the list of tomorrow. Because if I'm not finding people on the list, I'm afraid what the reason might be. There are times that we are not looking forward to tomorrow at all. There's something that happens in our lives. Next day when I came and I sat in that basement where by every chair standing that dripping IV, the poison going into the people's bodies to give them a couple extra days, months, years, decades to live. And in the eyes of every patient, I see this question: what's going to happen tomorrow? I'm not going to lie, Pastor, Susie said. I resent it tomorrow. Can you blame her? Tomorrow, not a big fan. I had to sort through my own thoughts and feelings as I was sitting there. And I'm realizing that this is a metaphor for life. Either we know or not, we realize or not, but the life can be just this gigantic infusion room and the time is just dripping away, just those IVs. I'm sorry if it doesn't sound like a very cheerful introduction to our Christmas season. But I feel that as soon as we're capable of seeing the reality of this world, we realize that the value of living, waiting for the Christ to come, not ignoring, not dismissing, not avoiding, not neglecting the reality, changes our perspective and attitude. And I think the entering with a cheerful spirit into the Christmas season, we're not doing it because we're not aware of the reality, but we're doing it precisely because we know exactly what it means to live. And we know exactly what it means for us to celebrate Christ's coming. And the value of this changes. We cannot control it. We cannot ignore it. We cannot let tomorrow control us and live in fear of us. And this is maybe when Jesus sees this question, what about tomorrow? Jesus sees that in their eyes, just like we can see it in the eyes of the terminal patients. We could see it in the eyes of the students who now sitting in the classrooms and see that the world is just changing, and who can predict what the situation is going to be culturally, politically, in a year from now, 2 years from now. We don't know. We see the changes. We see this question in the eyes of someone who is stuck in a cubicle at some tech company, or driving on the 78 freeway through the holidays traffic, or just simply playing with the kids in the background. Where do we hinge our hope about tomorrow? How do we assure that our world won't fall? What can we count on? Luke 21, verse 33. Jesus says, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will certainly not pass away." Tomorrow cannot be assured by human achievements or dismissed by human ignorance. In fact, I think Jesus is trying to tell us something about tomorrow, that tomorrow itself might be this human construct, this human temple that we built and we try to live putting unrealistic expectations or ignoring or predicting. But tomorrow is that important? Matthew 6, verse 34. Therefore, stop worrying about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So we begin to understand that Jesus apocalyptic speech about tomorrow is really not about tomorrow. It is about today. It is about the reality. And the warning of stay alert, and this word stay alert, Dementyev, now addressed and have a much deeper meaning than just don't fall asleep. I think staying alert, seeing and understanding the reality, and to be aware of something and something that comes and changes our lives, it changes our attitude. Staying alert in Jesus' interpretation in the way that he says, don't let the unknown future to control you, requires a different kind of awareness and alertness. One of the greatest experiences of staying alert that I had, and I had the privilege of observing, is to watch competitive swimming. And particularly that moment when the swimmers get on a diving block and the whistle blows. I wanted to ask an expert in that field who just happened to be related to me. Fletcher has been a competitive swimmer for 12 years. And for 12 years, we've been watching this alertness. So I wanted to ask him to talk a little bit about the alertness, because I think it might be telling us. All right, Fletcher, thank you. I know calling you out like this, it's a little unnerving, but it's not more than unnerving than to actually to compete. So can you walk us through when you swim and you're very well aware of this sense of being alert? So how does this, when you go to race at the swimming pool, what happens? Can you walk us through this process?
Well, it's something that took me definitely a while to develop. Our coach had us listen to a sports psychologist. Said one of the best things you can do for yourself is to have a consistent pre-race routine. And so every swim meet we go to, everyone has sort of a different warm-up. You kind of do your own thing, something you're used to, and then the moment before you swim, everyone has their own pre-race rituals. And so mine has always been like 5 deep breaths, and I don't know, that's something that I'm very comfortable with. And that's always right before they blow 3 sharp, short whistles. And that's to come up to the block. So there's kind of a whole bunch of stuff behind, timers, chairs, all that sort of thing. And then 3 short whistles, and then you go up to the block. It depends on the meet, but that's generally how it goes. And then there's a long whistle, and the long whistle is to actually get up. And it's fun to watch because it's like all these people kind of moving in synchronized motion, everyone kind of getting up on the blocks. And then once you get on the block, it's kind of important not to hunch over right away. You'll see it, depending on what level of swimming you watch, things will change. So little kids will be very cold, they won't stay warm. When they get on the block, they're very nervous, they're very close, and they're like super ready to jump in. But when you watch professional swim, some will even take control of the ref and they'll hold their hand up and take their own time going down. So it's important to like stay calm, stay relaxed. But
can I interrupt you for a second? I never thought of it, that the changes of the level of racing. So young, immature racers, for them, alert is being extremely nervous and cold and uncomfortable.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, so the biggest dudes come in with the parkas and the long socks, and they'll take their time. Women, sorry. So they take their time, they get up there, and then you hear "take your mark," and it's kind of strange because it's not really a human voice. They speak into like a muffled amplifier.
The voice above.
Yeah, it's really kind of weird. It's like "take your mark," and it's like, oh, okay, time to go, right? But once you go down, then you're waiting for a beep. And
can I stop you? So, take your mark is actually a term. Now it's time to be alert.
Yeah.
So this is the everything is ready. Everyone is ready.
Right.
Okay.
So there you're already kind of down, and there's kind of 2 things happening at once. There's a dual nature moment, because internally, you have all your weight on your front foot, really like this. And your back leg is pressing against a short, like if you've ever seen track, the back block. So your foot, you kind of pressing this way and pressing all your weight down on your foot. And if you watch, you'll see all of our hands down on the block, but really we're pulling up as we're staying still.
Can you pause in this position?
Yeah.
So what it looks like that nothing is happening, but the work and the physical work and the mental work is probably close to climactic moment because every muscle right now is working. We just don't see it. Keep going.
Right. And so you kind of have to tense your arms up, your calf down, and then your foot against the back block. And you're standing completely still, but you feel like almost like you're racing already because everything is so riled up. But in your mind, you can't be that tense because when you're waiting for the beep, if you jump early, it's like, that's it, your race is over. So you have to be really clear-headed, and you can't be thinking really about anything. I think it's so funny, like you spend all these months getting ready, practicing, training, thinking about how the race is gonna go, but in that like short 2 to 3 seconds, you actually can't think of anything. Like your mind is completely blank and you're just listening. And so you have this kind of calm listening in your head and everything else is like ready to go. So it's kind of a dual nature in that moment.
And then what happens?
And then you hear a beep and then you try to get off the block as fast as possible. So it starts with your back leg and you press back and then you jump up and you pull your arms back. Kind of depends on the person. Some people throw their arms back. Some people draw up in it, some go over.
Why is it so important, that moment when you're listening, when you're shifting your weight? Why is it so important to start the race properly?
It's a great question because the fastest you'll ever go in a race is the like half a second that you're in the air before you get into the water. As soon as you get into the water, there's so much drag that you're never gonna hit that speed that you hit in the very beginning. And especially for shorter races like the 50, the 100, the 200, you jump in and then your dive underwater is carrying that momentum and then that momentum's carried into your stroke. And so if you have a really efficient, comfortable dive that's also very quick, you can get into your underwater and through that underwater, you get into your stroke. So it's really a line that you draw sort of like this right into your swim. So it can set you up for a really good race.
So just to conclude this, I'm grateful for you doing this. So being alert in that split seconds, because race sometimes comes down to 1/100th of a second.
Right.
So just that a little tip, but that starts with a routine that precedes it. That's how you prepare for being alert. It comes to that moment that you be able to abstract everything else and just listen. And then to realize what lies ahead and to be able to connect all these pieces together. So being alert is not the moment, it's the whole process. It's basically a life that now comes to this climactic moment on the block.
Yeah, if you put it that way, it really is what connects everything you've done to everything you're about to do, and it has all these implications to whereas you can either make everything you've done really critical into what you're about to do, or you can disjoint it. So it's that transitional moment.
And the maturity of the process comes with you're no longer nervous there, but you're part of this process, you understand what happens, and your alertness, and more mature you are as a swimmer, that level of alertness increases, but also improves your performance.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Fletcher. Staying alert, not being controlled, but to realizing, not being paralyzed by the stress, by the moment, not neglecting it, but being assured by the Word of God. And I think that metaphor of taking off, diving off the block was so telling, because this is the deeper meaning of being alert. When visually you don't see much happening, you don't realize that moment, but so much goes into being alert. And I don't have to worry, I don't have to be ashamed and to know am I alert or not, because there's very clear way, and God opens us the opportunity to know that as long as you follow the routine, as long as you follow the steps, as long as you're participating in a life of competitive swimmer, you're preparing yourself. That's how you're maturing. And from being scared, and sometimes Christians will look like a little kids preparing to swim. We're just scared and we're ready to go to heaven somehow. And when we hear the blow, but this is not the idea that Jesus brings. This is not only to wake up from sleep. This is opportunity and invitation to reevaluate your life and to think of it. What am I happening in my life? What do I do that transforms my patterns? How am I looking? Am I aware of the moment? It's very important that listening, because when you on the block, if I understood Fletcher correctly, it's that listening to that beat, because when it's split second, the person who gets into the water half a second or 1/100th of a second sooner has an opportunity to win the race. Olympic Games are won sometimes by 1/100th of a second, and that's just listening. Our English what's our English word obedience or listening to God comes from Latin two words, obedir, from Latin word obedia. What obedir means audio. We know the word audio is for listening, and obe is intent listening. So the obedience, now it makes sense why Jesus says that my word does not go away, because as long as you listen to the direction, this is what it means to be alert, to be connected. The deeper sense of awareness, when nothing else matters. Verse 28, and now when these things begin to happen, stand up straight, raise your hands, because your redemption is near. So the question about tomorrow and what Jesus brings tomorrow, it's not really about tomorrow, because tomorrow often is based on human foundations. And I'm going to share just something to give you to think about. We have 3 more weeks to discuss it, and feel free to text me or call me or catch me after. I would assure that it's so human for us to live about tomorrow and to worry about what happens tomorrow. But really, the message of the second coming of Jesus is not about tomorrow. It's about the day after tomorrow. Because when we have this idea that now, no matter what happens tomorrow, there will be a day after tomorrow, and this is the day of the second coming. Jesus says, don't let that day fall on you unexpectedly. What we need to worry about, not necessarily what happens, because we're preparing for our final race. And our final race not into tomorrow, our final race into eternity. And what happens after tomorrow is what determines who we are. And as Seventh-day Adventists, we become the people of the future. We're thinking and we're observing and we're changing our lives of people who come not based on the past, not based on the realities and the negative realities in the future, on the unknowns and stressful tomorrow. We base our hopes and hinge our hopes on the Word of God that takes us beyond tomorrow, the day after. The day after tomorrow is what matters today the most. And I think this is what it really means to believe in the second coming of Jesus. On your mark, stay alert, church.
Please stand with me for the closing hymn. Let all things now living a song of thanksgiving to God the Creator triumphantly raise. Who fashioned and made us, protected and stayed us, who guideth us to the end of our days. His banners are o'er us, His light goes before us, a pillar of fire shining forth in the night. Till shadows have vanished and darkness is banished, as forward we travel from light into light. His law He enforces, the stars in their courses, the sun in its orbit obediently shine. The hills and the mountains, the rivers and fountains, the deeps of the ocean proclaim Him divine. We too should be voicing our love and rejoicing with glad adoration, a song let us raise. Till all things now leaving, unite in thanksgiving to God in the highest, Hosanna and praise. Amen.
Have a very alert week, church. Blessings, and we will see you all in the day after tomorrow. Amen. Blessings. We'll see you next week as we continue our sermon series about the Advent. Have a great week.